Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Can you hear me well? Are we good? Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to be moderating this panel for the third time, our intersectionality panel. Before I kick off and explain how this is gonna go, just want to give a huge thanks to Julia and Rhiannon. They are so amazing. They impress us. They impress me every single year. This is my third year. They're such impressive young people. We were just telling them how what we were doing in high school versus and it wasn't like putting on all this. Like I'm going to tell you that. So, we are so impressed by them. They're amazing. Just the way you can gather the community and it gets bigger every year. I am so impressed with you all. And I love moderating this panel. So, we have an amazing intergenerational panel today. We have panelists of all ages here to talk about their queer experiences and how things may have differed and how things may have been the same. And it's going to be really cool and fun. We have an awesome group. Where do I want to begin? Oh yeah, I need to introduce myself. Actually, let me start with the ground rules. Okay. And then I'm going to introduce myself. Okay, before we go ahead with introductions, I just want to set some ground rules for our panel today. I want to create a nice, brave environment for our panelists today. So in order to create that brave space for our panelists who are kindly sharing their personal stories with us and being vulnerable, we just want to set some agreements for our time together to make it a nice space for everyone. So today's panel is not going to be about questioning the validity of anyone's identities, whether that be sexuality, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. We are going to recognize that all identities are personal, valid, and real, and we're going to do our best today to honor everyone's identities and pronouns and names. So again, just as a reminder, thank you. Appreciate that. So just, as a reminder, again, today is about celebrating queer identity. Today's whole event is about celebration. So this panel is meant to be an educational moment, and we're really grateful to get to hear the stories of this amazing group of panelists. So just want to kick off with that. And before we go ahead, can we just give a little round of applause for our amazing panelists who took their time to be here today. Cool. So we're going to kick off with introductions. I will start by introducing myself. I'm the moderator of the panel today. My name is Alanis Perez Rivera. I use she, her pronouns. What do I say about myself? I currently am the inclusion and opportunity coordinator at WilmerHale, a law firm in Boston. I was doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work at LaSalle University for a few years before that, helping run the Intercultural Center, advising Pride, and just the way I've been able to create spaces for folks and their identities that in turn has helped me be comfortable with my identities over the year through this work has been amazing. So I was so honored 3 years ago when I was asked to moderate this panel. Okay, well, that's me. I'm going to let folks introduce themselves if we can go down the line and begin with name, pronouns, age, and any identities or labels you feel comfortable sharing. Yeah, do you want to begin? Sure. You can use mine maybe. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Atkinson Davenport. My pronouns are he, him. I am 40 years old, and I identify as transmasculine, as non-binary, as a lesbian I'm in a lesbian marriage rather, and sometimes as a man.
Hi, my name is Christine Caswelch. I use she, they pronouns. I am 32, and I identify as a queer, biracial, black, neurodiverse musician who uses historical performance to talk about underrepresented and unrecognized histories and people.
Hi, my name is Rhiannon Esposito. I use they, she pronouns. I'm 18 years old, and I identify as queer, white, gender fluid. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Morgan Beckford. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm 38 years old. And the way that I would identify as is a plus size, queer, black woman raised in the South, which is a very important part of my identity. I choose black very intentionally because on one side of my family, it is African. We are African American and all of the things that come with that and this history of this nation. On the other side, we are Jamaican. So both of those, I think black encompasses both of those identities for me. Oh, wait.
Hi, my name is John Mazzullo. I'm at the far end of I'm 82, so I'm stabilizing the old people. A little closer, okay. 82, if you didn't get that. But anyway, I identify as a gay man, and I kind of rankle at the word queer. I'm trying to get used to it because my generation didn't like that word too much. So you have to excuse me if you see my spine kind of shiver a little bit when they say that. And I have to learn how to say pronouns. I didn't know what a pronoun was until I took French, so I'm a he, him. So I had to learn that so I could say it correctly. I should say a very important part of my identity is I'm a retired primary care doc.
And I'm Julia. I use she, her pronouns. Let's see. I'm 18, and I'm gay. Yeah.
Yeah. I just got excited to share from this group because I didn't share any identities or labels. I'm 26, I'm pansexual and Puerto Rican. So just throw that in before you begin. Thank you all so much. I'm so excited to hear from you all. So I let our panelists know, but I'll let you all know. Not every panelist needs to answer every question. This is going to be a fun, organic convo. So if y'all want to bump off each other, someone says something that inspires you to say something comes to mind, go right ahead. And if you don't want to speak to the question, you don't have to. We have lots. So I'm going to jump right in on our first question for our panelist. In what ways has your age influenced or impacted your queer identity? And how has your understanding or expression of your identity evolved as you've gotten older? So anyone who wants to jump in can go first, and we'll go from there.
So where I am now as a 38-year-old, I think I was discovering my queer identity when I was like 15, 16 years old. And I think at that time, I didn't have a lot of representation on what that looked like. And as I went to college, I was like, oh, I've seen on the L Word what being queer could look like. And maybe that's my people. So if I find people that are like that, maybe that's how I find community. I went to grad school, in DC, which had a very, very, thriving black queer community, saying, am I a stud? Am I a femme? Who am I? Who am I supposed to be with? And I think where I am now is I know who I am. I've tried on lots of different aspects of identity. And I think I've settled with something that actually feels much more aligned to who I was as a kid. I'm just myself, but older. And I think where I am now, I'm in the stage of I know who I am, and now what do I do with it?
Yeah. Adulting.
I guess I should say something. I've got 82 years to put in a couple of sentences. I've had about 50 gay lives, I think. That growing up in the 50s, you can imagine what it was like living during the McCarthy era and all the prejudice. And the closet couldn't get big enough, for sure. And I didn't have any role models at all. There was nothing on TV except Liberace and that Simmons guy, and I didn't like either of them. And they didn't quite fit me. I was more a Pat Boone type, and that just didn't quite fit. And I didn't really know the word gay, I don't think, until college, to tell you the truth. And but I still was very closeted because nobody was out in college. Nobody ever talked about it. The 70s were different. The 70s were exciting. People started, after Stonewall, I went to my first gay pride parade. Unfortunately, it was on my father's birthday, which was not a good choice. So we had a little discussion about coming out and what that all meant. And then I went off to medical school, which is also not a good choice for a gay man. Because talk about being in the Marines. They kind of put out cookie cutter doctors that don't have much of a personality. We're supposed to be kind of blank. And anything a gay man is, or a gay person, period, is we're not blank. And so I had a tough time fitting in and learning how to. But there was one thing that happened that was exciting for me, scary but exciting in 1981. And that was that virus that killed a lot of people. And it galvanized me. It gave me a life in medicine. And I found respect, and I found community, and I found myself. It's hard to say because it was such an awful time. I had a gay practice at Tufts Medical Center. I took care of a lot of gay people. I probably buried about 100 gay people and other kinds of people that caught HIV. And so then I had another life when I became a patient and realized what it was like being on the other side, being a gay man. So there's all these little eras that I've had, and it's been an incredible experience.
Thank you. Yeah.
I actually found that I really resonated with what you said. I mean, it's speaking as somebody who has, come out as trans just about a year ago, come out as queer just about a year or two before that, all of which, happened in response to my now wife coming out to me as a trans woman, right? And kind of the ways that sort of opened up a journey. But for me, I think age, the thing that I think about when I think about age and intergenerational and queer community is precisely how much my experience feels like it mirrors the experience of a gay cis man growing up in the 50s, right? The ways that I didn't have language for the things that were wrong with me, the ways that there wasn't a concept for what I was. Transness wasn't a thing, right? We knew gayness was a thing, but I liked boys. So there was nothing wrong there, right? And so this sense of not knowing, but also feeling drawn to queer community and being drawn to these stories of risk and marginalization. And now in this life, in this sort of last 5 years, seeing so many of the kind of same patterns that I have sort of heard queer elders tell me about over the years has been really profound and really useful and really just something to think about.
Apologies, I'm gonna stay. I didn't want to cover Atkinson, so I leaned back.
No, that would be better.
Okay, we're good. You wanna add? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting thinking about not knowing and a lot of this feeling of uncertainty. And I think one thing that happened for me coming out as queer as a young person was that it was less I felt sure about what I was saying to the adults in my life that I was coming out to, but society, I think, tells young queer people, oh, you actually aren't sure. So then the not sureness actually comes from the outside, not the inside. And so I think it's interesting because it sounds like y'all are talking about the uncertainty and the unknown kind of coming from the outside, but also a lot from the inside.
Very powerfully from the
coming very, okay. So yeah, I think that's exactly the same for myself as a young queer person but I think there's also a lot of then I started to feel less sure about what I was originally feeling very sure about because other the oppression was saying you're not actually sure, you don't know, because then that's young people's oppression, which is you don't know what you're talking about, and then it's also just queer oppression, which is what are you? So I think the mixing of those as a young person made the uncertainty happen actually as I felt like I was growing into my identity rather than starting from my the beginning of my journey.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that one before we move on to the next? Awesome. We'll move on to the next question. Thank you all. So I really like this question. So I'm wondering, what queer representation did you have in the media as a young person? Were there queer characters in TVs/movies? How were they depicted? Or maybe how were queer folks represented in news, if there were any large news?
Well, I'll start out with the big
Yeah,
negative.
Yeah, you start out.
It was just awful because everybody wound up dead at the end. And, I remember seeing Shirley MacLaine in a movie about lesbians in a school.
Children's Hour.
Yes. Oh, my God. That was just awful. And I didn't understand it. And it just, you didn't want to go to the movies. And because the pressure from the outside, and it really didn't change because then it got to be stereotyped. But now I laugh at mid-century modern. I mean, it's so weird because if I had watched that 30 years ago, that's about 3 gay men living in Palm Springs like the Golden Girls. And it's so stereotypic and so bad, but I've grown up and now it's kind of funny. And it's hard to understand that transition.
I think that I feel really grateful to have grown up in a time when there is so much representation, and I feel so fortunate that there are just so many options, period, about what to watch, and so you can kind of see yourself. But one thing that I have noticed that's sort of a trend, and I'm curious to know if this is something that is not new, but the idea of queer baiting, which is, okay, so this is the idea that you have a show, and there are characters in that show who are not explicitly stated as queer, but the audience and the society that receives it says, oh, that one's queer, like canonically queer. So, a little bit, I think it's really interesting because that's sort of a way for directors and movie makers and show makers to skirt actual representation, and so they don't lose straight or maybe homophobic viewers who wouldn't want to see a queer character, but they sort of hook in queer viewers without real representation. And I think that is where the question sort of comes in of representation is important, period, but good representation, and representation where you see characters and you see their struggles and their full human selves, not just their identities, but you do get their identities. So I think it's a big balance and it's really challenging. But again, definitely progress, so much progress has been made since the shows and media that you're talking about.
I think that one will. Yes, I would say for me it was, so Xena, Warrior Princess, was a very big thing for me. And I knew because I lived internationally when I was a kid and I moved away from the US when I was 4. And the only thing I talked about when I was living there was how Xena was my favorite thing. So I know I was watching her at the age of 3 or 4, and I was still she's the best. And I actually just watched it again recently, and I personally find Xena so fascinating because it wasn't really subtext. It was written by a lesbian woman, and I was expecting season 2 or 3 to be where we start getting more of the kind of gay undertones and elements. And I was oh no, this is it is there from the first episode, and they're just going for it. And then every 3 or 4 episodes, they'll introduce a man, and then he'll disappear the next episode, and then it's just oh, they're back to being wives, and. Highly recommend if you haven't watched it. The camp is amazing. And then I would say after that, it wasn't until really high school that I saw, Grey's Anatomy in 2008 had Callie come out as bi, and then you had Arizona Robbins introduced in 2009. And I think for me that was really important. And then I didn't really start questioning or kind of figure out that I was gay until high school. And then there was a lot of Googling of how do you know you're a lesbian? And all these things. Yeah. I was on the internet. Yeah. So much Googling, so many quizzes on how to tell if you're a lesbian or not. And I was I saw. But then once I kind of figured it out,
I was Googling what are like the quintessential lesbian movies, but I'm a cheerleader was a huge one. Yes. Imagine Me and You, and just kind of, and then a lot of like, just like really stereotypical, like power dynamic lesbian relationship in movies that were, and I was just like, this is so unfortunate. But I think like more recently getting to see well-made movies, or just how there are queer characters just a part of the main story and fully accepted. And then also going through the queer baiting of like Rizzoli and Isles and Once Upon a Time, and kind of also the Kill Your Gays, continuing off of, like the 100 and stuff. So I think I really enjoy seeing where we're going, and kind of it's more just like integrated into the storyline of you're going to have more people of color, and you're going to have more just like queer different identities just automatically in these televisions, shows and movies.
I would just push back against automatically as a thing that happens, because I don't think that happens. I mean,
I only watch.
I'm only pushing back a little bit because I guess I think about representation, and I think about, growing up in this time when you saw more and more, starting with like The Birdcage, right, is the movie I remember from being a kid. And you watch it now and you're like, it's just, I mean, the actors are brilliant, but it's also kind of cringe. Like there's some really tough stuff. But for me, again, thinking about queer identity only along the lines of sexual desire and attraction really led me astray. I would say in terms of representation of my experience as a trans person, I have not ever seen it. The closest thing we have is The Matrix, which is an allegory. The closest thing we have are like really interesting allegories that I would commend to you highly. But I think that in terms of trans experience, that is still ahead of us.
So I think for me, when I think about queer representation in media, I think it's really hard for me to separate like all of my identities, right? So when I think about all the media that was present when I was coming up, it was all white. All the queers were white. All the queers are white. So like when I would hear in my different communities, like, oh, at church I might hear like, oh, that's a white people thing. Like black people don't experience that. The media that was around me was validating that, right? And for me, I think the first character for me was Joanne in Rent. Joanne in Rent. She was black. She had, like a black hairstyle. She had these parents who like came from wherever, like Connecticut or the Vineyard, and she had this like private school upbringing. And I was like, oh wow, that feels a lot like me. So like the Rent movie came out when I was a senior in high school, and I like threw a party and took my girlfriend and like a group of friends, and it literally in theater kid way, our whole personality. But I think for me that was the first character who I saw that I felt similar, like that I felt like I was represented by. And then in addition to that, like other black queer media, like I read The Color Purple, I read Giovanni's Room, I read stories, but like no one got a happy ending. So like anytime a black queer character gets a happy ending, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay, I'll use this one. I forgot the most important moment of my life. La Cage aux Folles, I have to mention. The beginning of the AIDS epidemic, I was still closeted, but I joined the AIDS Action Committee, and I found a home. I found gay people that were not suicidal, that were working to fix this illness, and I'll never forget that night. And I remember the feeling of when the drag queens came out and did the Rockettes at the opening, and the whole place just erupted. It was just one of those moments, and it allowed me to go through the next 40 years of gay life, because I can always remember that moment, and it allowed me to be a gay doctor and take care of AIDS people, which we can't forget.
Yeah, I think I've been trying to, I'll keep this quick. I've been trying to remember like my first memory of seeing queer representation. I can't put my finger on it. It it was like I can't put my finger on, but I remember like starting to seek out more TV shows that had more queer characters in them. Then I remember during COVID, I found this TV show. I forget the name of it, but it was about two vampires. They were both lesbians and they were in love with each other. And it was a First Kill. Thank you. And I was like, oh my god, I finally found something that like is in it, but it's not like only centered around their queerness, which I also liked because like I'd like them to have like lives too that are separate from their queerness. And then that was around the same time Heartstopper came out, which is this big TV show, especially popular in Julia and I's generation, about but the main two characters is this cis white gay couple, and they have a lot of the supporting characters are queer young people of color and queer gender nonconforming people. But after First Kill's first season, the one about the lesbian vampires, one of them identified as black. That first season was canceled after, and Heartstopper has now been renewed for a bunch of seasons, and like sure there's the representation in both of them, but I was so upset after I saw First Kill was canceled, and I was like, Heartstopper gets to keep going, and guess who the main characters are? Two white gay guys who are cis. And it's just like, it's still like, yes, the representation's there, but then of course the supporting, like the only black trans woman in the show is of course the supporting character who's only like in every other episode or something. So it's like, we're still not there. Anyhow.
There's some movies I don't get, like Brokeback Mountain or whatever the hell it's called. I never got that. It made me sick to my stomach.
I got it.
And I don't know why. Did you get it? Yes. I couldn't get it. And I just couldn't understand why they just couldn't go home and be happy together and set up life. God help us. Why was it so tortured?
Really close to you.
Oh, I know, I can't do that. I keep thinking I'm going to suck on this damn thing.
Please. Anything to add? We got on the representation? Thanks, everyone. Oh, I keep doing that. Sorry, I'm going to have to cover Atkinson.
I'll keep everybody away.
All right. I'm gonna keep it going just for the sake of time. So we were actually just talking about this amongst ourselves, but I would love to hear everyone's answers. What forms of queer representation amongst students, teachers, staff were present during your high school experience? Yeah.
So I was a theater kid. I'm sure everyone is shocked. And we did a play called It's Our Town Too at my private Episcopal high school. And it was basically a play that was cis gay people exist in the world, and they're in community, and they have families, and sometimes they have kids, and sometimes those kids get married. And it was, modeled on Thornton Wilder's Our Town, which is not one of my favorite plays. And it was one of those things that was like, even when we were doing it in high school, it was clear that it was pretty dated, right? That it was like, this was representation of something that was really important when it was written, and to even the kids performing, we were like, well, this is very obvious and we know this. But at the same time, nobody was coming out in high school. None of our teachers were out. There weren't any out gay people. And then, and then thinking about the ways that, like, sometime in the sort of 10 to 15 years after that, suddenly all of these people were out, and the ways that, like, that just sort of exploded, and the ways, it was just, it's a really interesting sort of cusp.
Thank you. No. Thank you.
I think this is cheating a little because it's middle school, but I remember thinking that there was a very clear divide between like queer students and straight students. And I remember like there was a meeting every Tuesday during lunch of queer students at my middle school. And I never went because I wasn't out in middle school. But I always like would look inside or try to sort of catch a glance. And I saw these people who were so like, at least to me, it seems so sure of their identities. And they wore their pins and they had their flags. And I was like, kind of jealous of the way that they were so sure of who they were, but I also sort of didn't know them outside of that room, the meeting for the like club. So I think that I had trouble finding people in my own spaces that identified as queer, and I sort of thought that I had to instead go into their spaces, and I couldn't find homes where I already lived. Like, I do a lot of visual art, and I couldn't find people there. There were people there. Trust me, there are gay people in art. But I didn't know at the time. I didn't know at the time, and I think that I sort of felt this challenge where I had to actively seek out community. But also, it was really great that it was there. And I remember one of my teachers, named Mr. Barr, was, I think, my first out gay teacher. And I just like became obsessed with him. And so I think having teachers as well was super, super helpful. And he showed me that like queer adults can just live and have normal lives. And he and his husband had a baby a few years ago, and just like learning that people can just be and be queer and seeing adults was really helpful to me. So I think that like overall it was a positive experience with my representation in like middle and then high school as well.
So for me, I was one of very few out people in my high school, the only out person in my class. So I definitely felt like there was not a lot of representation within the student body. My senior year, I dated like a girl at the rival high school, and we were both at all girls schools, and she was the only out person in her class. And it was very like, yeah, like a power couple, but also we were like, we don't know if we're right for each other, but we're both here and we're both seniors. So like, let's go for it. But my second and fourth grade teacher in elementary school at my Episcopal school were a couple, and they weren't out and open about it, but we had a book that we called the Buzz Book that had everybody's like names and addresses for sending birthday parties, invites, whatever, and the teachers were in there too. And you'd see Miss Falls and Miss D and their address that they shared. So in second grade, we all asked them about it, and I remember Miss Falls said, well, Miss D is my special friend. And that was her answer. And we all said, oh, we have special friends because Elliot's my best friend, and Mishi's my other best friend. And Miss Falls said, no, this is something a little different. And that's kind of where it was at that. But I think what was so reflecting on it, they were just who they were. And, you know, I think that part of queer representation was also really important in the midst of media and other things that were saying like, oh, it should look like this, it should look like this. Because Mrs. Falls and Miss D were just Miss Falls and Miss D, and that's it.
So I think for like high school, so I went to a really tiny private school. Like my graduating class was 32 kids. And so, you know, yeah, very tiny. And we were the largest graduating class that they had yet. So it was, you know, in high school, we didn't have any teachers that were out. We didn't have a GSA. But I do, you know, like going to that school in elementary and middle school in kind of the early to mid 2000s, it was like we did have some gay teachers that weren't out. And I do remember like kind of my classmates kind of like inquisition type being like, oh, are you gay? Like, do you have like a piercing on the left or the right side? Because if it means it's a secret message. And, you know, like, and it was, I didn't really like ever think about it, but I think like for me that kind of was really and then in high school when I was kind of like figuring out that I was gay, I didn't come out to my friends except my best friend until like my senior year when we were about to graduate. And looking at kind of my class now, just a couple of them have come out as queer and different identities, and it's been really amazing. And I think probably at my high school there's probably some more representation of the teachers, but yeah.
The piercing thing is so real. I took out my nose ring so recently. I don't have it, but when I was 18 and I was like, I'm gonna get my nose pierced, and like people all felt the need to be like, well, I wasn't out. I came out at like 20. Well, remember, right is wrong or something like that. Like, don't get the right side because that means you're gay. I pierced the right side. I was like, hey, I'm doing it. But yeah, that's so funny. I was like, why does everyone feel the need to tell me what I should pierce. It was strange. It was strange. And the assumptions there were interesting. Selfishly, I'm going to speak a little because you just all had me thinking about my high school experience, and I was friends with a lot of lesbian women, and they could all tell that I was queer. Like they would always point out like me wearing flannels and stuff like that. And I think I couldn't come out in high school. And if they hit on me, like I liked it. Like I was attracted to them. Like I certainly was attracted to them in high school. And it just hit me that I didn't have like the bisexual representation around me to like put a word to it, because as folks are, questioning if I like women or if I'm a lesbian, I am sitting there like, but I like men. Like I know that for sure. So I didn't know what I was, and if the bisexual representation was like more strongly there around me, I think I could have had the language to figure out where I was then. So anyway, y'all had me thinking. Awesome answers. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to keep it going. This is kind of adjacent to what we just answered. Some people went in this direction, but if you want to add anything, I'm curious how growing up you found queer community, and how do you find and engage with queer community now?
Okay, so I have a really funny story. So when I was in middle school, in college, I found a journal from that time period, and on the back in like purple sparkly pen, I found all of these AOL AIM chat room names, and they were like lesbianist, lesbian, with like all the X's and the different like capitalization and all those things. And all of a sudden, I remembered that when I was in 6th grade, I used to go into lesbian chat rooms to try and get them to like tell me about like what it was like to kiss a woman, and And then I was like, there's nothing important for me here. And wait, what was the rest of the question?
How you found queer community then, and how you find community now.
And so that was like finding that. But then I think, when I came out, or when I figured out that I was gay in high school, I was in Indiana, and there was actually IYG, Indiana Youth. I think it was gay, or IGY, Indiana Gay Youth, and it was actually like a house, and there they had rooms for gay students or gay young people who had been kicked out of their home, and it was a community place, and they had things for under 18, over 18, and kind of support for also like medical things, and that was really amazing for me as an 18-year-old to find that space and to see all of these different kids and identities and ages. And then I think now it's just kind of, I only really surround myself with like queer people because it's the space where I feel safest. It is just, we like find each other. We kind of like are like, yes. That was actually my first like gay friend in college. We were in the same orientation group, and we both had like the really shaggy pixie cuts and the flannel cutoffs and like the Bermuda shorts. And we made eye contact, and we were like, we are, yes, you're gay. But yeah. Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to be a real downer after that, which is to say that I feel like the framing of this question is really great, because the way the question is framed really points me to some of the differences in like intergenerational experience of of sort of queer identity, or that there. Which is to say that the idea that there could be a community other than normal people is something that was really not, I did not have access to that until pretty recently, right? And the idea that that queer community had its own center of gravity, that people who were kind of didn't really quite fit into the world that we were expected to fit into, that there was another sort of way of sort of finding circles, that's still quite new to me. And I think, again, with the coming, just the trans experience is different in many ways. The place that came in for me was online, was social media, Blue Sky, is if you want to know about being trans, Blue Sky is your place. And I don't think I could have really. I don't really know how to communicate how life-changing it was to see my experience reflected in ways that it had not been reflected back to me when I keep thinking about what Rhiannon said at the sort of very beginning of this conversation about coming in as a child with certainty and being met with a reflection of, oh no, you're just mistaken. You are uncertain. You don't know what you think you know. You don't, and having myself, having the things that I said about myself not be reflected back to me, and the kind of absolute just lostness and confusion that creates in the psyche. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. I don't think I could have come through that or past that in the ways that I'm beginning to without the experience of online space.
I just have to follow up on you because the experience of becoming a doctor and becoming gay, becoming a doctor and also being gay at the same time is so complicated that it's hard to even put into words. We don't talk about grammar school, high school, or college because that was just in the dark closet. There was the only thing that I knew was that when I went to the train station in my hometown, there were these pictures of these gay men covered with mineral oil, and they were these physique magazines. And I thought that was community. And to make it so sad, I remember sitting in Washington Park. No, that's not the right way. By NYU. Is that right? Didn't sound right. Washington Square Park. I knew it didn't sound right. I remember sitting in Washington Square Park next to the office of one of the physique magazines so I could find community, and I sat there all day. I had no concept but my life was a mixture of gay bars, the Tubs, which is the gay baths, and cruising. That was my community. There was no real place to go until I went to upstate New York and found the Gay Liberation Front. And that was a major change because I met people that were part of the community, which I did not exist in. The way you said it was just so perfect. How could we believe that there were people like me on the other side of that rainbow? It just didn't make any sense. And I had my first real relationship in Rochester. And then the next big step was coming out to my family, and the next step was fusing my medical life and found a whole community of gay doctors, gay nurses, gay healthcare people through the scourge of AIDS. And what an awakening that is. But it doesn't have a happy ending. Because one of the reasons why I'm sitting here is I found that after I retired and became, and I'm a little, and I have some medical problems, that I became invisible in the gay community. That unfortunately what age does, and you can see it in the crowd out there, but what age does is it makes gay people invisible again. And it is so sad to see this arc. And after I'm retired, I spend my evenings watching Murder, She Wrote. And life's got to be better than that. In the 70s, I couldn't watch it because I was so busy and happy. But at any rate, the reason why I'm here is I found out that the city of Newton, thank God, has now we call it older age program or something like that, a senior citizens program. And there was a gay group, and Rosa is sitting right over there with Sandy. And I got up enough nerve on a Monday night to go to the meeting at the library with my husband James right over there. And we were scared out of our minds, but we found community at 82. And I'm on this stage because of Rosa. So there's hope. And I hope that as I get older, that I still meet gay people on the other side of the rainbow, which is the most important thing. We used to go around saying, "Are you a friend of Dorothy?" which was our James Bond code words. And that's still appropriate when you're 82 because you just don't know. So it's another phase of life. It's amazing how the gears keep shifting. So it's not fun. I guess there's going to be a question at the end of this where you're going to ask what I would change. You know what I would like to change? I'd like to be born now than then. I would have loved to have a gay association in my grammar school or my middle school. I would have loved not to feel so scared being Catholic and Italian. And I would have loved being a normal person that had normal friends that I could laugh with. And I didn't have to wait for a disease to kill us off to help me find community.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing, John. We appreciate you. So glad you found community. Yes.
I'm just sort of listening to all this and thinking about, like, again, the ways that it's just that it is hard to imagine at any stage of life how much things are going to keep changing and how much you are going to have to keep changing with them.
I'm just going to be transparent here. We want 2 more questions or we want 1 more question? I was going to bring us in for a landing. Oh!
Like confetti.
2 more questions? Folks have time? Okay. Okay. Last couple questions. But now I have options. Folks want to talk about family? Folks want to talk about what they learned from other generations? Let's go there. Okay, we're going there. I made my decision. So we're gonna land on final 2 questions. So would love to hear what you all have learned from queer people of other generations. Just think it's a suiting order. Whoever wants to start.
So my background is one background is in youth work and youth ministry. I was a youth minister. I was a high school teacher for a while. I was a nanny for a while. And for me, my experience of recognizing that transness was real was with kids that I worked with. I worked with a few trans children, and I wanted to take good care of them. And so I wanted to listen to them and respond to what they were telling me about themselves. And in that, I learned so much about what was possible for myself. And I guess one of the things I always say is, like, you learn wisdom as you get older, but you also lose wisdom. There are things that you know when you're a child. There are things you know when you're a teenager. There are things you know when you're an elder, I think, that you don't know at other life stages. And so it's really important to me to kind of, as I get older, keep listening across generations because I learn so much that way.
Thank you.
One thing for me, I think, is I think there's so much to learn from other generations, but like I feel like I'm kind of the younger generation right now, so I often look to older generations. And I think what I see is that there's always been something to fight for, and there's always been a cause and a need. And I think what younger generations collectively have learned is just like that we can meet that need. If that need is fighting an epidemic, if that need is fighting for representation, whatever it is, we can do it. And I think that, like, I listened to your story, John, and I think, like, you did it. And so we can do it too. And, like, I don't know, I think that it's really beautiful to think, like, the specific challenges change, but the determination and the ability of the community to meet those demands is a constant. And so I think it's sort of like a knowledge of our collective worth and ability that I really learned from other generations.
I think, like, just even sitting up here and listening to you, especially John, like, I could sit here for days and days and days and still feel like new worlds are being opened up to me because, like, I think we also need to remember that, like queer elders, like, they are like living representations of history and of queer history, and like you carry so much with you and you hold so much in you that unless we have these types of conversations, like people cannot see from just meeting you. And I think like kind of off of what Julia said, like there's always something we're fighting for, but I think like listening to all of us up here, the consistent thing keeps it keeps being, we want to be seen and we want to feel seen, like by ourselves and by other people. And I don't think that has changed. And just seeing the different ways in which like that feeling unseen manifests throughout different generations is really interesting to me. And then to see how like there is a specific some family friends who's a queer couple, and they have a daughter, and I've like known them my entire life, and kind of growing up in my queerness alongside them as an older queer couple, and being able to just like see myself in them, and also just feel so happy like knowing that they are older and that they have done it and that they keep going. And like just I think older queer people are such an inspiration to myself, and also an encouragement to keep my journey of self-discovery going, because I think like from the non-18-year-olds on this panel, like it seems like y'all, like what you said at the beginning, like you're at the place and you're like, okay, where do I go next? And I think that is an important reminder, especially coming from adults, because I think sometimes, or a lot of times, adults are like, yeah, like we know who we are, like we've got it figured out maybe, but this excitement of like jumping off point, like I'm an adult and I'm at the jumping off point, like that's so cool to me. And I love like thinking like that, and like growing up and thinking, okay, I'm always discovering new things about my queerness and about my community from someone like John.
I think something from older generations that I really appreciate and kind of hold is joy as an act of defiance. Just seeing the queer community who has suffered such an immense loss. You know, we, from the 80s to 90s, just hearing from my theater teachers in high school or in college, just how many voices that we lost. You know, like on the Black side of my family, I had a cousin who was bisexual and was writing all of these really amazing things, who ended up passing away from AIDS, and he like taught at Yale, and you know, his voice and the ideas just as this one individual were so important to the community. And then you just multiply that, and still in the face of that loss, there was still this joy and this coming together and this support for each other. So I think for me, just looking at what's happening in the world right now, just reminding myself that to find joy is so important. Just like that. Yeah, speaking of joy. And then I think for the younger generations, just I have so much, I'm such in awe of y'all as 18-year-olds, you know, like I was kind of in this, I'm a younger millennial, and so I was going to high school with Gen Z, and just kind of watching that transition and the thoughtfulness and kind of that y'all have is just so amazing, and it inspires me to be more intentional about what I am doing and how I can help support and serve the people around me. So yeah.
Just one thing I thought as you were speaking on that point of like certainty, like I was talking about at the beginning, as a young person, when I first came out feeling like this, like feeling certain about what I was feeling, and then as I started to become more uncertain because of the like targets of oppression that I was talking about. When I meet younger queer people, like the first CQC, Julie and I were talking with, how old is Vivi? Like seven young queer 7-year-old, and how sure they were of their identity reminded me how that certainty feels. And then kind of like just like being refreshed by the young queer people, like 7, 8 years old, is really powerful. And I didn't realize that until I had that moment with them. And so that was really cool.
And I wanted to say that about folks younger than me and the younger generation, because it's, again, back to the just like joy being an act of resistance. I think it's so awesome to see young people just like discovering themselves and who they are and doing it loudly and externally from a young age, because I feel like even I didn't do that, right? I was certainly questioning myself, but I wasn't doing it loudly and externally. And I think it's just an act of resistance, right? Like this self-discovery is gonna be loud and it's gonna be in your face, and I love that so much. So I love to see that from the younger generations, and from the older generations, just to be reminded of the fighting and the resistance, and have that fuel me for current day resistance, because unfortunately we're still showing up to protest, we're still out here fighting for our rights. And whenever I see folks from the older generation coming back with like those signs that say like, I can't believe I'm doing this shit, like 30 years later, that empowers me to keep going. Like, and obviously I hope things are better in 30 years, but in 30 years, if I have to come back out, I'm gonna do it too, right? Like, just the powerfulness and the resistance. Amazing. All that to say, I feel like we all can learn so much from one another, and the intergenerational conversations are so important. Did folks have any last thoughts to add to that one before we come in for our landing point? Yeah, please go ahead.
Ditto to everything that everyone has said about young people. I am in awe of you. I am in awe of you. And the joy that you bring into the world, into living in this conversation, into bringing it to community like this, makes me feel so much better about the world that is to come in the midst of all the terrible that is. So thank you. I learned a lot from you.
All right, we're gonna bring it in for a landing, friends. If we can do it quickly, just so folks can have time to explore the resources. But it's a tough one to do quickly, so do your best. It's all, we're chilling here. If there was one thing you could tell your younger self, what would it be?
You're a boy.
Pretty simple. You wanna go down the line?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think what I would want to tell my younger self is that you don't have to change or hide all of the parts of you to make yourself feel like you deserve love, and to find that love. You, just as you are with all of your messy parts, are deserving of love.
This has kind of been my motto for the past 15 months, especially during the college process. But I think, like always, I've realized that things are the big decisions that I've had to make over the past couple months have been much easier when I bring in my younger self and my third and fourth grader Rhiannon, and not even just just in general, yes, related to my queer identity, and wanting them to just be so. I think I was very loud and expressive in everything that I was doing, but just your younger self, all the things you thought that I thought about when I was that age that I wanted for myself, I can make that happen, but I have to trust that those things can happen, because I think for example, I'm going to study theater in the next 4 years, and that still I say that I'm that's kind of a crazy thing to do, because it's very unpredictable, very not a stable field at all. But my fourth grade self wanted that so bad, And I think in the past 15 months, I lost sight of that a bit because I didn't think it was realistic, et cetera, et cetera. And coming back to that and like deciding this is what I'm gonna do. It's like my fourth grade self was right all along. Just little bumps got in the way to make me forget that they were actually right. They were like right on that path. So just trust your inner child and trust your younger self because they still know what you want, what present day you want, I think.
Okay, so mine is very similar to Christine's. And I wrote a note to myself, so I'm going to read. Hey, girl, this is 7th and 8th grade Morgan, by the way. You don't need to look a certain way, be a certain size, act a certain way, or show up a certain way to be worthy of love. You deserve the same love that you see all around you, just as you are. And you will find it in lots of different forms. Get ready, hang on, it's gonna be fun.
I can't add anything more to that, but I think that one of the challenges that we all have is being ourselves in such an awful world and trying to balance between the love of the gay community and how we manage to do so many great things and how evil the other world is to us. And it's just so frightening in some ways that we have to learn how to straddle those two worlds because you feel like you're being split up the middle. And we have to live with them because they're the majority. And the majority rules with respect for the minority. But that doesn't always happen. And it's very sad in some ways that what you just said just doesn't always happen. And it's hard to end on an up note because it doesn't look like that the love between us and the majority population, whatever that is ever going to be healed. They're not going to let us have people read books together. We're not going to be able to sing songs together. We're not going to be able to make love together. It's just not going to happen, unfortunately, in our lives, but maybe it will.
I think what I would say is that it's okay to not be sure and even to be wrong about who you are. I think when I was first coming out, I had a very specific idea of who I was, and I was like, okay, you are romantically attracted to women and sexually attracted to men, and this percentage, I wanted to fit on a graph or something. And I really thought that I needed to justify my identity by explaining it in excruciating detail. I know, you literally could. I did. I'm sure I did. So I think that I really was focused on giving the exact, this is who I am inside, now I'm going to give it to you on the outside, and it's going to be in chart form. And, I think what I would tell a younger me is, no, girl, you got to reel that in. But also just, it's okay to say, if someone asks you who you are, it's okay to say, I don't know yet, or I don't know, period, or I'm still trying to figure it out, or anything like that, just because, I don't know, I think that you are who you are inside, and I think a lot of the labels that we use, although they can be really empowering, are made by the majority in some ways, and it's made to make us more understandable to the majority. And that isn't to undermine how incredible they can be and how good they can make people feel, but for me, I found that I can't really fit how I feel into one of those labels. So I think I would tell my younger self just to take it easy on myself and be okay not knowing and be okay having other people not know about me. It's okay just to exist and figure it out from there.
Well, that's all the questions we had. Can we give another big round of applause for our amazing panelists?
Also, thank you to Alanis. Let's give a big round of applause
Thank you.
for her.
And to our wonderful audience for sustaining the mist. Yeah, this has been an awesome experience. Just to be in community with one another. Thank you to everyone here. Thank you for all sharing some personal aspects of yourself. It takes a lot to sit in front of folks and share that way. So yeah, I guess thanks to everyone, and that's it. Hope you can all enjoy the rest of the celebration.
Yeah.